All right. So our next event is something you guys might not be super familiar with. Parliamentary debate.
So parliamentary debate is something, as Hal mentioned, that this team has excelled at. We won multiple tournaments across many divisions, and as Hal said, ending up as the #1 parliamentary debate team in the nation. Thank you.
And I'm not 100% sure if Hal mentioned this, but this is the first time that the community college has ever captured the #1 spot for this sweepstakes. So let's give a round of applause for some community colleges today.
So the debaters you are about to see are the cornerstones of this great team. They represent state champions, they represent national champions, and every single one of them, at least once, has been invited to the national tournament, or national parliamentary tournament of excellence. So please welcome Virginia Kerr, James Guller-Rogers, McKenna Peterson, and Jimmy Henry.
All right.
So normal.
So normally in a tournament, the topic is usually announced 20 minutes beforehand, and each team has about 20 minutes to prep their case. But for tonight, we're going to jump straight to the debate.
And Kenya, can you please announce the resolution?
The resolution tonight, which was brought to us by your guys' suggestions, is America is no longer the world leader.
So presenting the affirmative today will be James and Virginia. So they will be arguing in favor of the resolution that America is no longer the world leader. And presenting the negation will be McKenna and Jimmy, who are arguing against the resolution, presenting arguments that America is, in fact, the world leader. Enjoy the debate.
Oh, yeah. All right. Howdy, everyone. So, without further ado, I'm going to present the first speech in favor of the resolution that America is no longer the world leader. Now, before we get into the debate itself, we need to figure out what it means to be the world leader. America, obviously, is the United States of America, and the definition of the world leader that we're going to be using for the purposes of this debate is a single country that is able to lead the international community. We don't exist in a vacuum as much as certain presidents may or may not want that to be the case, but the fact is that we are on an Earth that has more than 190 countries that occasionally have to work together. When it comes to the question of world leadership, we need to be able to look at whether or not the United States is effectively able to garner the support of these other countries in achieving our goals and our collective goals abroad. So, with that, we're going to be looking at two different types of power, two different ways that we can get what we want, called hard power and soft power in international relations talk. It's basically the idea of a stick and a carrot. Hard power is, if you don't do what I say, I will smack you over the head with this stick. Now that may be something like economic sanctions, it may be something like carpet bombing an entire country. We've done that a few times. It works for some things. Then there's soft power. It's more of an influence kind of thing. Soft power is the idea of someone agreeing to do something without you having to ask, or someone agreeing with you on the basis of finding you a good role model in the international system, mostly accomplished through diplomacy. So first, let's look at this issue of soft power, because I think that's the more important one here. So a few reasons why the United States is no longer the world leader in terms of soft power, in terms of diplomacy. The first one is that the organ of the federal government that's responsible for diplomacy is the United States State Department. And as of 2017, according to Business Insider, more than 2/3 of the positions in the State Department that are appointment-based had not been filled. And since then, the number of people who have quit have outweighed the number that have been appointed. So what we're looking at is a situation where I'm sure that all of you have had a job at some point. Imagine if you're in your workplace and then suddenly 2/3 of your coworkers quit. Probably not going to be very effective at whatever you're trying to do, whether that's serving hamburgers, selling clothes, or, I don't know, trying to run the entire world community. Now, some specific things that may be of particular concern. We don't have an ambassador to South Korea, which might be relevant because we're trying to get North Korea to stop having nuclear weapons. We don't have an ambassador. The ambassador is the one who's supposed to be leading all of this sort of negotiating. Not great. The reason why that's not great is because when you don't have a civilian foreign policy apparatus, when you don't have the State Department, all that power, all that decision-making gets shunted onto the other people that handle foreign policy, the Department of Defense. Now, say what you will about the American military, they're not great diplomats. They're great at a lot of things, most of them being killing, but the fact is that when you have a military in charge of foreign policy, what it means is that all of these decisions are viewed through a military lens. Rather than thinking, what is the diplomatic option, they are thinking, what is the military option? What is our response in terms of warfare, not in terms of diplomacy? Now, the second thing to think about when it comes to soft power is that it's not the Wild West. We have rules when it comes to the international law. You're not supposed to use chemical weapons. You're not supposed to have nuclear weapons unless you're a signatory to this special treaty. Not that anyone pays attention to the damn rules anymore, but I'm not Walter Sobchak. So what we see is that when it comes to the system of international rules and international institutions, the United States has been sort of falling out of step with the rest of the world. Back after World War II, we basically created an international order from the ground up because every other country in the world had just gotten carpet bombed into the dust, and we were the ones left standing, so I guess that makes us the winners. So the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund were the central organizations of the new world order as established in the post-World War II environment. And we basically own those things. But what we've been seeing in the past few years, over about a decade or so, is that there's an emergence of alternative institutions where countries, especially in the developing world, are deciding not to deal with the US-based institutions and instead that they're going to go along with especially China and Russia as leaders of these alternative institutions like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which directly rival the World Bank and the UN in their function. Now, the last thing when it comes to soft power is the idea of international actual straight-up diplomacy, like negotiating with other countries. The two things that are most critical right now in terms of the eyes of the world community are dealing with the threat of nuclear weapons and dealing with climate change. Now, we missed the boat on climate change, let's face it. Like the Kyoto Protocol came and went. We're not a part of the Paris Accords. We're literally the only country in the world that is not a part of the Paris Accords. When it comes to denuclearization, I'm sure Donald Trump is going to take credit if North Korea gives up their nuclear weapons, but it's probably more likely that the constant negotiations over the past 60 years by the South Koreans are responsible. And we left the Iran deal or Trump announced that we were going to leave the Iran deal about 7 hours ago. This can't be overstated. That was the single biggest diplomatic feat since the fall of the Soviet Union. We got together the largest powers in the world and agreed with another country that we were going to establish a framework for them to not get nuclear weapons, but for having an international inspections regime, and the US walked away from the table. I don't know about you, but if I'm trying to sign a contract with someone and they keep walking away from the negotiating table, I'm probably not going to come visiting them the next time I'm looking to make a deal. That's business 101. Maybe someone should teach Trump. Now, let's talk about hard power. Unfortunately, I ran out most of my speech time talking about diplomacy like some kind of wuss. I'm sure Jimmy's going to jump on me for that. But when it comes to hard power, the critical thing is it doesn't matter how big of a military we have if we don't know how to use it. And maybe this is just my perspective, but I feel like the 21st century is not our greatest hits chapter when it comes to military intervention. Like back-to-back World War champs, that's awesome, but Afghanistan, that war is still going on. It's officially the longest war in US history. There's still no sign of the Taliban being defeated, and we are still no closer to having a stable government. In Iraq, we invaded in 2003 under false pretenses. Colin Powell basically straight up bald-facedly lied to the UN General Assembly. And if that doesn't hurt your credibility, I don't know what does. But then, in the process of our intervention, we created ISIS. The fact is that the way that we achieved our policies in getting rid of the Saddam Hussein regime led to this huge number of people who had no jobs, no job prospects, but a lot of guns and 30 years of military experience, which is not a good recipe for a stable nation. So what we see is that when we do use hard power, we use it so badly and we misapply it so extremely that it makes situations worse off than when we first touched it. And in the international community, generally people don't like people who just run in, say YOLO, and then make everything worse. Maybe I'm oversimplifying things, but I believe that America is no longer the world leader. I'm now ready for cross-examination.
All right, James. So, first question for you. Has there ever been a world leader that hasn't been the strongest military power?
We could get nitpicky, but I'm going to go ahead and say no because that's what you want.
Nice. Second question. So, you're talking about these international institutions, that we created to run the world, like the UN and the World Bank and the IMF. Are those still around?
Well, I don't know, Jimmy. Are they?
Yes, they are. And who still owns those?
China.
You're saying China owns the UN that is located in New York.
Technically, that's international territory.
And you're saying that China owns the World Bank that is located in Washington, D.C.
Well, I mean, how much of our debt do they own? It's like who pays for the thing.
Ah, okay. Fair enough. So, if we're no longer the world leader, is there one?
Nope.
So, who are our closest competitors?
Mostly China, but Russia's there too because they still have like 3,000
that's all I
nukes.
All right. So now that you've heard from the traders, I'm going to be telling you how the world actually works. Okay. Everyone ready? Great. Starting time. So let's talk about hard power first because James undercovered this and we're about to blow it up. So the American military budget is over $650 billion. The next closest military budget barely cracks 200. If you take the top 10 military budgets in the world and you combine 9 of the top 10, that's still smaller than ours. America can literally do whatever it wants on the world stage because our military is that much better than everyone else's. Now, some key examples of this. We have 800 foreign military bases. Do you know how much the rest of the world has combined? They have 30. When we have over 10 times as many bases in 50 times as many countries, we can put our troops wherever and whenever we need them. So, when they say that the Russians and the Chinese are capable of overtaking American global hegemony, you think to yourself, how many allies do the Chinese have and the Russians have to illustrate this forcible coup? Combined, they have 3. One of those is North Korea. Come on. America has over 50. And 3 of those are the UK, the French, and the Germans. 3 of the largest militaries on Earth. Now, if you take something like, I don't know, NATO, which America owns, and pit that against like the Russian military alliance, which consists of Vladimir Putin, some Russian oligarchs, and Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and you have them fight, we're going to win. Now, another key thing here is the US Navy. The US Navy is awesome. The world, in total, has 36 aircraft carriers. Everyone knows what those are. Those are the boats that fly planes off of, right? Those are the fun ones. So, aircraft carriers are awesome because if I'm, say, a country on the other side of the world, and I don't know, some crazy madman in Syria decides I'm going to drop barrel bombs and chlorine gas onto my people, I can go, no you're not, we're going to blow you up, and I can launch F-35s off my aircraft carriers and blow up his chemical weapons stockpiles, which is not a hypothetical, we did that. Now, the world has 36 of these aircraft carriers. Do you know how many of those America owns? 19. Well, yeah, and half of them. I think that's bad. I'm bad at math. I'm in a speech debate. So, you want to know how many China owns? They own 1. And guess what it can't do? It's actually not combat capable. So if the US Navy decided to fight the Chinese Navy, we'd have planes, and they would have none. You know what that means in naval warfare? It means we win. Now, the Russian Navy is something I like to talk about a lot in debate, and I don't have enough time to go into it, but it's really, really, really bad. It's like hilariously bad. Like, the Russian Navy is basically like the beginning of It when Georgie has that paper boat and he floats it down the sea. So, they make these arguments. Well, sure, you have all this nice, cool toys, but you can't use them. Look at Iraq and look at Afghanistan. Sure, I'll give you that. We made some bad choices, but there are 2 answers here. First, Iraq has a democracy now and is not run by Saddam Hussein, so it took a while to get there, but at least that finally happened. And the second thing is they say, well, you created ISIS. You've created this worldwide scourge. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you saw something about ISIS? It's been a year. You want to know why? Because we killed all of them. ISIS at its peak was estimated to have about 100,000 fighters. The US-led bombing coalition, which I'll get to in a sec, killed 70,000 of them, right? So we're clearly winning. Now, when we messed up Iraq and Afghanistan, which we did, they're right, we learned our lesson. We said, that was a bad idea. We tried that. It cost 6,000 dead and untold billions of dollars. So we went, what do we do next time? So when ISIS showed up in Iraq, President Obama made a smart decision. He said, we're not going to put boots on the ground. We're going to blow them up from the skies with our cool aircraft carriers that I've been telling you about for 2 minutes. And that worked. The rest of the international community said, hey, look, America's learning. America's not invading Iraq a second time. They're arming local militias. They're helping local peoples fight back, and then they're blowing the hell out of them from the sky. And they got involved. It's a coalition of over 60 countries. It's bigger than the coalition we went into Iraq with. Clearly, the international community trusts us to invade and to do what we need to do militarily. Now I have to get to soft power, so we're done talking about the fun stuff for a little while. Okay. So for soft power, they make several key arguments. The first argument is that the State Department is empty and we can't do negotiations. Except, haven't you guys seen the news? We're negotiating with North Korea. That's clearly going well, so something's right. They say we don't have an ambassador to South Korea, except we don't have an ambassador because, Republicans in Congress, it's a political appointment, so you have to get them confirmed through Congress. And if we've learned anything in the last 10 years, it's that Republicans in Congress are historically bad at getting things done. So instead of waiting for that long process, we just kept the guy who was already there from 2015 to negotiate for us. And what's his name, McKenna?
Mark Napper.
That guy's great. He's been there for 4 years now, and he's leading the charge, and it's going really well. Second, we fired Rex Tillerson and just got Mike Pompeo to run the State Department, and according to some experts who were writing for Vox, he's going to fix things. So yeah. Next, they talk about civilian decision-making. Now, I'm not here to judge Donald Trump. I could, but I won't because I don't have enough time, and I did that the last speech night. So, no matter what you think of the man, he's clearly rather decisive. He kind of does what he wants. He doesn't let the Pentagon tell him what to do. When he wakes up this morning and goes, you know what, I don't like the Iran deal, he pulls out of the Iran deal. When he wakes up and says, damn it, Assad, stop dropping chemical weapons on people. Mattis, go blow him up. He tells him to blow him up, and he does. Trump does what he wants. It's kind of his hallmark. No one controls the man. No one knows what he's going to do. He clearly does his own thing. And last I checked, he was a civilian official. So the military isn't running our foreign policy. Well, some of it. Now, they talk about international institutions, and they say, oh, look, there's the Asian Investment Bank, which is clearly toppling U.S. global leadership. But there's 3 things they mentioned before, the UN, the World Bank, and the IMF, are still around. The UN has nearly every country on Earth. The Asian Investment Bank has 3. It's got the Chinese, it's got some guys from Pakistan, and then probably some North Koreans are involved. The World Bank, located in Washington, D.C., which we clearly own, is run by us, and it's got everybody. So, if you were going to measure the Asian Investment Bank and the Shanghai Co-op thing against literally everyone on Earth, clearly America's still leading the party. Now, they also say this last thing. They say, oh, look, we're out of the Paris Climate Accords and we're out of the Iran deal. Well, this is cheating. When we made this case, the last week, I didn't know the Iran deal was going to get pulled out of, so I'm kind of up here having to fumble for answers, and I've got a good one. The answer is, when we pull out of the Iran deal, which happened 7 hours ago, we don't really know how that's going to go. We're not really sure what's going to happen. So in today's debate, you're not going to be like, oh, well, I believe the Iran deal stats, so I'm going to vote only there and ignore all of Jimmy's fun stuff about aircraft carriers. You're going to kind of give me some leeway on that because I found out about this 6 hours ago. The second thing is the Paris Climate Accords. So the Paris Climate Accords are literally awful because they don't make anyone do anything, and I'm also out of time. So thank you very much. Yes.
When was the last time we won a war?
So the last time we actually fought a war was World War II, and we won that pretty significantly.
When was the last time we beat an insurgency?
Technically, we just beat ISIS, so about a year ago.
Did we beat ISIS, or was it the ruthless carpet bombing of the Russian Air Force?
Well, when America's coalition killed 70,000 of the 100,000, then yes, we win.
So, all your fancy aircraft carriers, if no one lets you use their airspace, what good are they?
Everyone lets us use our airspace, except like the Russians and the Chinese, because they get kind of grumpy at us. But like everyone else is totally fine with it, evidenced by the military bases we have in their country. They're going to let us use the air if they let us use the land.
So, your whole, like, we outspend everyone else. Like, I'm really bad with money. If you give me $600 billion, I can make terrible decisions with it. How does money translate into, like, actually being an effective military?
Because with that $600 billion, we built 19 aircraft carriers. And those are awesome. And then we maintain them. And then we use them to beat the crap out of everyone else.
Don't both China and Russia have, like, missiles that cost literally 1/9,000th of a carrier that can blow them up in one shot?
I mean, theoretically, but new technology in military applications traditionally goes badly the first couple times you try to use it, so no.
All right. I didn't start a timer for cross-X.
Okay, well, we could just keep talking. I'm sure they're enjoying it.
I guess one, no more questions?
Did you ask something else? Probably. Okay, let's go for it. If you haven't noticed, we like to talk, so we're fine doing this as long as we can.
So on soft power,
Yeah.
If Trump appoints Pompeo as like Secretary of State,
Sure.
isn't he from the CIA? Isn't that kind of the idea of putting military and intelligence people in charge of
The
diplomacy?
CIA isn't the military. There is definitely a line.
Ask Colombia about that. But that's my last question.
Okay.
All right, let's get this started. Everybody ready? Cool. Our opponents would have you believe that soft power and hard power never interact, that diplomacy and military operate entirely separate from one another. But the reality is that we cannot have one without the other. If we don't have enough soft power, we can't implement our military policies. If we don't have enough military power, we can't implement or back up what we say when we talk about diplomacy. This is misleading. So let's talk about the arguments proper. First of all, on soft power, America's military is best measured by the quality of its diplomacy. Diplomacy means we have embedded personnel on the ground, able to tell us what exactly is happening, and able to tell the military what their goals should be. An example of the military, an example of us having no diplomatic personnel on the ground, as well as the military just basically doing whatever it wants, is the case of Syria. The Pentagon and the CIA, because we didn't have diplomats on the ground, went ahead and armed two different factions of rebel groups, who then fought each other. On top of that, the arms that we gave to these groups ended up with an ISIS-affiliated organization, al-Nusra. So, what were our goals in Syria? Who were we trying to fight? We ended up just like making it worse. On top of that, and most importantly, the military must have diplomacy to provide context. We need diplomacy to provide context for what is happening in North and South Korea. We need diplomacy to provide context for when somebody decides to bomb Syria, but there's literally never any context for that because we just do it once a year around April. On international institutions, even if the climate Paris Accords and even if the Climate and Paris Accords didn't have any actual legal teeth, and we pulled out of the nuclear Iran deal, and as our opponents say that we don't know what's going to happen, nobody knows, nobody can tell you what it's going to be like 6 months down the road. What this shows is an inability for the United States to cooperate and follow through on its promises. If we promise Latin America that we're going to give them a bunch of aid and then we don't follow through, we are a bad faith actor. How can we have any kind of reputation if we just don't follow through on our agreements and our promises and cooperate with the rest of the world. So, as my partner pointed out, the rest of the world is moving on without us and building organizations that bypass U.S. institutions, like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, like the Asian Infrastructure Bank. On the nuclear Iran deal, more specific, what this really indicates to our allies, France, Germany, Europe, as well as a number of other nations that our opponents talk about, is that we will not hold true to our security framework. If we promise Europe that we will protect them from encroaching Russian aggression, but then we don't follow through in another area, why would they continue to rely on us? So, that's soft power. Let's talk about the fun stuff. Military power. Outspending other militaries is not an indication that you are doing it well or that you're using it appropriately. In fact, our military uses a grand strategy of preponderance, which is throw everything at the wall and see what the hell happens. We don't have a strategy for how to deal with other rising powers, so we're just going to use tons and tons of military. It's literally a situation right now where it's shoot first and never ask any questions. As for bases, many of our contracts with for military bases in other countries are actually going to be up in the next few years. If we've shown ourselves to be such a bad faith actor, are they going to renew those contracts? On top of that, many of our military bases don't even have good reputations. You can look to the Manas Air Force Base that was closed in 2014 in the country of Kyrgyzstan, which was the jumping off point for forces in Afghanistan. It was closed because we were dumping fuel into their rivers, and military personnel shot 2 unarmed civilians. So even in the big sphere, we don't have a great reputation, and locally, we don't have a great reputation. It doesn't matter where we want to, it's not a question of going where we want, anytime we want, bombing whoever we want. It's a question of, can we effectively use military power to persuade the world to follow our lead, especially, and really, we leave destruction in our wake. We create a hydra, we cut off one head, and then there are 5 more that grow. According to an analysis by the RAND Corporation, the ability to power project has more to do with soft power and economic cooperation in the 21st century than having military power. An example of this is that, the US has severely underdeveloped the global south, and the other countries are filling in to take care of that. On top of that, these Western institutions that the negative talks about, the IMF and the World Bank, lodge all of these loans onto the global south and make it so that they can literally not be able to pay these loans back. So China fills in. Their policy of South-South cooperation undermines US power projection and, undermines US power projection. Also, that helps the developing world and actually hands out loan forgiveness. China and Russia are a threat to American imperialism. They're not a threat to the American people. Our opponents are going to say that Russia and China are human rights violators, but so is the United States. And then on top of that, our opponents will say, yeah, but the US has learned tons and tons of lessons. We've learned from our mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan. We won't do it again, and everybody will continue to look to us in the international community. But if that were true, after 9/11, we would have remembered the 52,000 American names who were at the Vietnam Memorial. We would have remembered them, and we would have remembered not millions, but probably hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese civilians who were killed in Vietnam. Literally, Iraq and Afghanistan were Vietnam 2.0. We made the same mistakes 30 years apart. Why won't we make the same mistakes 10 years down the road or in the next 6 months? And for that, you'll be voting for the affirmative.
You mentioned the diplomatic crisis going on in Syria, where we armed 2 different groups who fought each other. When was that?
That was in after 2014, or around 2014.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean, Syria's been falling apart for a long time. When we decided that we needed to arm rebel groups, we do that all the time.
And you say that China is filling in. Where are they filling in at specifically?
So specifically, China is filling in the global south. So that would be Africa, Latin America, or excuse me, South America, Central and South America. And the argument is that while the United States claimed to send development aid to those parts of the world, we were actually just putting tons and tons of IMF and World Bank loans on them with really bad stipulations that came with it, which means that China has actually started, and since these countries can't actually like pay back these loans to the IMF, they keep hitting like economic crises and whatnot. So China actually is handing out loan forgiveness as well as helping to develop their countries. You can look to like they're building trains across Africa.
Would you say that China has ever had a very serious interest in being a global leader, like policing the world and interested in leading?
I don't think they're interested in policing the world. I don't think that they want to be number two, but nobody wants to be number two.
Okay, so you talk about like America has human rights abuses. Is America right now committing genocide? Are the Chinese right now committing genocide?
Every country commits genocide. I mean, I know that the UN actually used the word genocide when they talked about the horrible atrocities that were occurring to Black Lives Matter and like people who were fighting back against police. The word genocide has been used to describe the situation in the United States in which unarmed individuals are being killed by police officers. So everybody commits genocide. It's what we do. Is that it? Cool.
Oh, this is a great res. Okay. We kill a lot of trees. We have a lot of paper that we waste. Okay. Get the timer. All right. Everybody ready? Opponents ready? Audience, judges, ready? Partner, you ready? Yep. Cool. All right. So there's two things that are very important to keep in mind in this debate. The resolution is America is no longer the world power right now. Not in 6 months, not in 10 years. Right now, are we the world power? And the second thing to keep in mind, is there anybody on the world stage that is currently, as of right now, capable of challenging us through hard power or soft power? When the affirmative acknowledges that there are three world powers right now. It's us, it's Russia, and it's China. So keep in mind, is China or Russia able to challenge us through hard power or soft power? And we're going to find out no. On hard power, because we'll go there first because my partner has fun. So their main articulation is just because we have a lot of money doesn't mean that we know what we're doing. But here's the thing about hard power. It's like when you were growing up and there was that kid that had all of the toys on the playground. Who wants to play with that kid? Everyone. We have all of the military power, so everybody is interested in being our friend. So that's how, because they say we don't believe that hard power and soft power never intertwine. They absolutely do. Hard power is a prerequisite to having soft power. If you don't have any leverage, nobody's gonna like listen to what you have to say or care, honestly. So it's key to making sure that we are able to have leverage within the global community. Not to mention, as my excited partner articulated, America has over 50, we have 50 allies, and the two countries that we were competing against in this debate have a total of 2. That doesn't work well for having hard power or soft power because you don't really have anybody that's gonna back you up militarily or diplomatically. Also, oh, the Navy. Yeah. There's just honestly not really a debate that's there's not a debate on whether or not we have the most hard power. We do. We have the most bases, over 800 in countries outside of the United States, while the rest of the world combined has 30. So we are able to project our power wherever, whenever we want. And yes, as we said, the ally system makes other countries reliant on us in multiple ways. Also, their idea that because of Iraq and Afghanistan, we no longer have credibility. But as my partner mentioned, Iraq now has a democratically elected government. So I guess that was kind of, what we went in for. And not to mention that other than us, people have nowhere to go. China can't challenge us, Russia can't challenge us, so we are the military power within the global community. And that means that people come to us when they want help. So there's no doubt we're winning hard power. It's just the numbers add up. On soft power, and my partner spent less time on this, so I'll go over it a little more. Once again, like cleaning up a man's mess, fun times. So, soft power. They do not give you a specific example within the last year of the idea that we don't have a specific ambassador. So that specifically has caused a diplomatic crisis. My partner articulated, because I gave him the warrant, Mark Napper is in South Korea. So we have a representative that has actually been at the U.S. consulate, at the U.S. base there since 2015 in Seoul. So we have somebody, he also speaks Korean and Chinese and Vietnamese. He's very well versed in the issues of the region. So we still have representatives representing the United States in these countries. It's just not that we have an ambassador. And they give you no example as to why that has uniquely been a problem. So you're not really going to vote on that. Also, they make the argumentation that diplomacy provides context, but once again, we still have diplomacy, and how the Iran deal is uniquely bad, but you're not even going to look to this as a unique thing that's going to win the affirmative of the debate, at the point in which we can't tell whether the Iran deal is going to actually cause the amount of impact that they're claiming it's going to. The president of Iran even said, we're staying in the deal, and everyone else has said that they will, so it's not caused the type of, they're not going back to nuclearization right away. It's not that serious of an issue as of now. And remember, what we're looking at is right now, is America the world leader, not in the next 6 months. They also make these arguments that we are no longer leading international institutions. But like my partner articulated, we still lead the World Bank, we still lead the UN, not to mention we are the largest economy in the world. Economic leverage is key to having soft power because it's key to having leverage. And at the point in which, once again, we have to look at the alternatives to this soft power argument. Are Russia and China better at soft power? Russia just decriminalized domestic violence, not to mention when they invaded the Crimea, AIDS increased tenfold. China is currently committing genocide against, the Uyghurs? Yeah, the Uyghurs, which is a Muslim minority population. These are not countries that people look to for values. Yeah, the United States, we don't have a great record, but we are miles ahead of the two alternatives when it comes to leadership and values and what the global community is looking for in a leader and what they're getting. Because as of now, on an economic, on an ethical, and on a military scale, America is unequivocally the world leader. Thank you. My bad.
Okay. So, when we're talking about soft power, you say that Russia and China are super unethical. Does anyone in diplomacy, I'm not saying that we should just worship bad ethics, but does anyone actually care? Does that factor into anyone's negotiations with either Russia or China?
Yes.
Can you name an example of that happening?
Pretty sure the British Prime Minister condemned Putin because they killed a dude they were trying to protect. You know what I'm talking about, Jimmy? Yeah.
Okay.
They if me and Jimmy were debating in Russia right now, we'd be shot in the face after. They care. You guys would care, right? No.
Okay. So if everyone cares about human rights so much, then when Amnesty International came to Ferguson and said, holy, insert expletive here, you guys, this is a mess, did anyone like stop trading with the US or anything like that?
No, because we're the
What
world
about
leader.
when we killed all the Native Americans or during Jim Crow?
Those things are technically not occurring
Or,
right
like,
now.
Japanese internment? No, but my point is, like, when has ethics ever impacted international relations?
I mean,
Don't we live in a terrible world?
they don't. We do. We do. But the reason it doesn't affect us is because we're the world leader. So people don't mess with us because they know they would lose.
Okay. All right.
I'm not saying that's a good thing either. I'm sad. It's not about if we're a good leader, but we are leading. But it's not
If
fun.
we're leading, then how come when we jumped ship on the Iran deal, it's still happening?
Well, we don't know. People might pull out.
So when you said that the Iranian president said that even if the U.S. pulls out, we're going to keep in the deal.
Yeah, I'm saying right now they are.
Okay. Okay.
I'm back. Okay. I have 4 minutes to get through things that I would like to get through in longer, but we'll try. And is everybody ready? Okay, let's go. So, starting time. So, hard power is a prerequisite to soft power. Now, let me give you an analogy. If geopolitics is an ice cream sundae, then soft power is the whipped cream and the cherry and the hot fudge and all the pretty looking stuff. Hard power is the ice cream. Without hard power, without the ice cream, you don't have a sundae. So, when you look at it, when you look at how does the world work, who are you going to follow? If I'm Poland and I've got the Russians staring at me across the border and I'm wondering who do I follow in the world? I'm going to follow the team that can stop the Russians if they roll over my border and say you're part of Russia now. That is and will be America. They say, oh, we spend our money badly. We don't know what we're doing with it. But that's the point. They say, oh, we just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. That's the point. We can throw everything at the wall. And it works. We've built coalitions of 60 nations to take down ISIS. We've built international institutions like the UN and the World Bank to increase our hegemony abroad. We have over 800 bases, and they say, well, some of them are closing. And even if you close half of them, we still have 10 times as many as the next closest competitor. So, when you look at it from the perspective of hard power first, soft power second, America is clearly the world leader. But James is going to get up and tell you, don't do that, don't listen to Jimmy. Jimmy's a warmonger, and he's a bad person. So, we're going to look at it through the lens of, maybe soft power is more important. So, if soft power is more important, then right now, in the status quo, the U.S. still has the most of it. The U.S. has the UN in New York. We have the World Bank in D.C. We have all these institutions that have worked for 60 years to keep the world, let's be honest, in our pocket, and they're still functioning. Now, I can't guarantee you that in the future, America won't lose this status to great power competition. What I can tell you is they'll have to wrench it out of our cold, dead hands after we fight them for it. Now, here's an interesting thing that I've found. They say that we have a lack of reputation. We have problems with police brutality in our country, and that's true. I don't want to diminish that in the slightest. But when China is literally committing genocide against a Muslim religious minority, if I'm anyone in the Middle East who follows Islam, I'm not going to like them because they're killing people of my religion for being my religion. If the Chinese want to go out and say, hey, we want to give you this big loan, and America comes and says, we want to give you this big loan, James will say, well, they'll take the loan with the best interest rate. I'll say they'll take the loan that isn't going to get them caught in some kind of weird sphere of influence that genocidal Chinese people are pushing on you, right? Like, they're not going to be like, hey, the Nazis are coming, but they're giving us a better interest rate, so let's go with that, right? We live in a cold, hard world, but I like to think that the world is slightly better than James does. I like to think that there is some hope. People aren't entirely evil. Let me sum something else for you up. So, when you have the economy, because they say, the economy is key to leverage and to soft power. Well, world trade, 70% of world trade is over the ocean. It's on the water with the boats. When world trade is entirely backed by the power of the U.S. Navy, then we own the economy of the world. Take, for example, the problem of piracy. When, nations say, oh my God, pirates are raiding our shipping, we need help. Have you all seen that Captain Phillips movie? Where the guy comes in and says, I am the captain now, right? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? See, when that happened, America said, no, you're not. We sent in the Navy and said, we are the captain now. So, to sum up, America can and has invaded most of the world, and then learned from our mistakes and invaded the world better the next time. We then leverage these stolen things we get from other people into economic power from the World Bank, which we use to manipulate other countries. Whether or not that's good, it is what it is, which we do right now. So we own the world through force, we own the world through money, and we're not committing genocide. So, for all these reasons, America is still the world leader.
Let's clear some things up. Now, before I begin my final speech, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for making it out here tonight. It really helps to support the team. Now, pleasantries aside, we live in a terrible place, and let me explain to you why there is no hope. So, when someone is really, really good at a particular thing, they're called the Michael Jordan of that thing, because Michael Jordan was so good at basketball. The United States is the Michael Jordan of military intervention. We are really good at going in and blowing people up. We're really bad at the part that comes after, because there is an after. Yes, we come in, we blow people up. Is Somalia still a failed state? Yes. Afghanistan? Yes. Are people in Iraq, do they have a better quality of life than they did 15 years ago? Actually, no, except the Kurds. Gonna give them that one. Now, we're really good at that. But our record on soft power is a lot more like Michael Jordan. Although I suppose that Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson would have had similar baseball careers. The fact is, the United States can kill anyone we want, but that's not how you get leadership. That's how you get jumped. Because here's the thing, it's not just us and one other country, it's not just us and one other country, it's not just us and Russia, it's not just us and China. It's us and Russia and China meeting each other in a back room and saying, the Americans are gonna come and try and kill one of us, we need to take them first. Maybe that's not happening, maybe it is. But when you rely on military force as the alpha and omega of your foreign policy, that's gonna happen. For example, Jimmy loves numbers when it comes to the military. But numbers don't tell the whole story. Yes, we have like 50-ish allies. They have 3-ish, but that's a very narrow definition of ally. If I name the following countries, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Israel. Those are the 4 biggest US allies in the Middle East when it comes to the military. They also have all recently signed multi-tens of billion-dollar deals with the Russians to buy strategic weapons. Yeah, there are allies on paper, but people are hedging their bets right now as we speak. If we're the world leader, people aren't saying, maybe we should go and get guns from the Russians in case America comes for us. That's not leadership. That's when you've spent 25 years being a bully and expect that to translate into a permanent empire. So, let's talk about soft power. Now, the Rand Corporation probably doesn't sound like anything to any of y'all, but it's the single most important think tank when it comes to defense studies in the United States. And they say that soft power has to come first. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one is, let's talk about those bases. We don't own them, we rent them. We rent Ramstein Air Force Base from the Germans. So if we piss off the Germans, we lose that Air Force Base. We rented Manas Air Force Base from Kyrgyzstan. Then we started dumping fuel into their water supplies and shooting people, and they took it from us. In Japan, our biggest naval bases in the Pacific are in Yokosuka, which is just outside Tokyo, and on the island of Okinawa. And one of the biggest political movements in Okinawa is get the Americans the hell out of here because their soldiers kill and assault our civilians and nothing gets done for it. The United States isn't like some magic superhero that comes in and then Supermans someone into the ground whenever there's a crisis. We're still in other people's countries. We're doing bad things and then not punishing our people who do it. We're dismantling our civilian foreign policy apparatus and replacing them with more people from the Pentagon, so that when we see a crisis, our first question isn't how can we resolve this peacefully, how can we resolve this with a minimum loss of life? It's how can we protect American interests with a minimum loss of US life? Iraq and Afghanistan, 6,000-ish Americans were killed. More than 1 million Iraqis were killed. I don't know the number for Afghanistan off the top of my head, but here's a comparison. If the Vietnam Memorial Wall included the names of all of the Vietnamese civilians that were killed, it would be more than 3 miles long. So while we sit here and we think, damn, we're so cool, we beat the Nazis, the rest of the world is looking and they're thinking the US unilaterally invades. They don't clean up their mess. They can't be trusted in a negotiation because we spent, what, like 10 years trying to get Iran to come to the table for the nuclear negotiations and then walked 3 years later because some person got elected president? That's not the sort of person you trust to lead the international community. And also, like, it's just straight up more complicated than that. The sum total of US actions over the last decade have created a position where our generation inherited global leadership. The Soviet Union was gone. We were the only superpower left. We could do whatever we wanted. And we did. And then everyone realized, wait, whatever the US wants includes a lot of effing us over. And they're done with it. The rest of the world is organizing. They're building a new international order. Sure, there's only like six members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But when you have major international treaties on the most pressing issues in the world, nuclear weapons, climate change, and we're sitting on the sidelines, we've already given up leadership. That's why you're going to be voting for the affirmative.